So you started off in help desk. Give us a little bit of a background how you went from help desk and becoming a security engineer and eventually into DevSecOps.
Yeah, so I was working for a fairly large enterprise in their help desk, and everything I do, I try to do it, 150% as possible. I don't really see a point in half-assing the job. Even if you're not like you don't live to work or whatever, but there's no reason to do it poorly. So I was working help desk, and I'd always been, a pretty technical person in my life. Grew up with a computer, playing video games, had to figure out how to fix everything. So it's a pretty natural progression. And I was working at the help desk. I was working my way up. I ended up in a leadership role at the help desk, kind of like a tech lead, but for the help desk. And what help desk really does is not just teaches you how to do all the technical stuff. It gives you a really broad view of IT and in the world of technology. It also gives you a really broad view of how the business works, which is, I think, really huge for, prospective security engineers or existing security engineers. And I was just doing really well. I won a big award for the company called like the Chairman's Award. So they flew me out to meet the CIO and talk to him and the head of security at the company, and they were like, I think you'd be a really good fit for this role when we have one that opens up for you. And eventually one did, and I was a shoe-in for the job. And my first actual security job wasn't like your standard security analyst role. I was actually running vulnerability management for the organization. I built out Rapid7, stood up the servers, kind of built the program from scratch for a large org. And all of those relationships that I got working in the help desk, meeting people across the business, having to escalate things to different IT orgs, you know understanding how all the technology worked together, because when you have a P1 incident in the help desk, you're calling the Microsoft team, you're calling the server guys in the data center, and you start to get kind of an idea of how it all works together. And it was just a really natural progression for me, because in vulnerability management, you're just talking to all these teams, trying to get them all to fix things. It's the same thing, really, just at a different kind of scale. You're fixing slightly different things, but same relationships that I built from the help desk made it so I could be really successful in that role. And from there, I just kept kept working at it. DevOps was getting kind of big then, and like I think that was about 2016, 2017 or so. Um, and then I took another role after that, and it just kind of accidentally became a DevSecOps role. I was the sole security professional for like a small company, maybe like 100 or so people. And in that type of role, very similar to kind of like the vulnerability management role at a large enterprise, you have to build all these relationships with all these teams. You have to figure out how to get all this stuff fixed. And I ended up spending 90% of my time with the DevOps team, and just trying to figure out how to get everything fixed, automate the fixes, and build out kind of like that automated security strategy and that collaborative security strategy that's common in the kind of the soul of DevSecOps.
Hey guys, one quick announcement before we go any further. So we're helping some of our clients fill open IT and cybersecurity roles. So if you're interested in exploring new opportunities, contact us via the link in the description. Now, back to the story.
So, how has DevOps sort of adjusted and impacted the entire software development lifecycle, not just at Experian, but overall in the industry?
Yeah, well, I think it's a little both ways. I think there's definitely some good and definitely some bad. And I think most of the bad is due to just bad marketing. You know, every time a new big thing comes out, the vendors are screaming at the top of their lungs buzzwords. And I think that puts a lot of people off. And, first it was DevOps and it was DevSecOps. And, even now all these vendors are yelling about, all their zero trust DevSecOps nonsense.
AI.
Yeah, AI, GPT, LLM, security driven garbage mostly. It's all snake oil. But really, uh, you know, DevSecOps was just a graduation of DevOps. Really DevSecOps is DevOps. But I think the biggest change is that security is no longer an afterthought. For a lot of orgs that were doing DevOps, they were doing security, but since they weren't security engineers or they didn't have security engineers on the team, nobody was there to drive the remediation effort, the constant continuous improvement required for any successful security program. And not just security program, but any program you want to run in a company, you need that continuous improvement, that feedback loop, somebody to work with the teams, make sure it's still working. In DevOps teams, their first job is to make sure the software is being delivered and to fight the fires when they happen. So security ends up taking a back seat until you kind of introduce that sec component. And now that we're starting to have real security engineers with a security background coming into the DevOps teams and being a part of the product engineering orgs, I think huge impact. Teams are all of a sudden saying like, there's so many problems we need to fix, or they're seeing how well they're doing or not well they're doing, and how potentially easy it is to actually resolve. And before security engineers were involved in kind of the really embedded in the software development lifecycle, you had this huge problem at a lot of orgs where security would come in at a left field at the 1 yard line, and the whole project would be stalled for potentially months while some issues would need to be resolved. But with security engineers inside the product lifecycle, I'm fixing issues right out front. I'm starting with a threat model, and then we're working out any potential issues before we've even started writing code. It's like it's happening at that design phase, and then every time we're committing code, we're running scans, and they're happening quickly. We're getting feedback right away, not just in the pipeline in the IDE. It's everywhere. And now that we're having this, we're solving so much more issues. Code is becoming more secure. We're developers are starting to think about security on their own. So when they go to build things, they're proactive about reaching out to security when they're not sure. It's not just a technical change or a security improvement. It's really like a cultural improvement, and it's far more collaborative, especially since prior to DevSecOps, most security orgs were, and even now, a lot of security orgs are almost entirely separate from the rest of the organization, and it's like you're fighting against the security team, or you're the security team fighting against the developers, rather than your colleagues just trying to build the best product together. Now, on the bad side, obviously, a lot of the bad marketing, the bad press, vendors are partially to blame, and sometimes the security community is definitely to blame. Um, you know, just hearing all these buzzwords put people off. They hear, a lot of security engineers, Matt, this, we talk about cloud at meetups, and they go, cloud is just somebody else's computer. That's garbage. AWS is going to charge you $1 billion dollars because you left an EC2 micro on for forever.
Forever. Yeah.
And it's
No
calling
kidding.
itself in a loop on accident. And that same thing happens with security and DevSecOps. A lot of people in the security community, they have that hacker mindset, and they're incredibly resistant to change, and that's kind of a natural thing. So was the software community when DevOps started being a thing. So when DevSecOps started being a thing, DevOps engineers weren't for it. But a lot of the security community has been resistant to that. It's more to learn. Technology is an ever-changing world, so trying to keep up with the constant change, and especially the change in this area is moving so fast. Even for me, it's very difficult to keep up. But that's life. Change is the only constant, and taxes.
We can get into a whole other conversation about taxes. I'm trying not to pay.
T-tax doesn't seem so bad.
So one question I have, so software development, it's already been talked about that some companies are using ChatGPT to write code that they're putting into their software, which I could see that going two ways. I could see one, it creating pretty good code, but I could also see the exact opposite, where like you're just plugging a couple different pieces in without really examining the different dependencies and how they interact with one another, and create even more vulnerabilities. How do you think that AI written code is going to start playing out and affecting security?
In the immediate future, I think the biggest problems that we've run into are people putting their company's intellectual property into large language models that these large language models are learning off of. They're storing what you're putting into it, they're learning off of it, and anything it learns off of is an open secret. Cheap generative models don't have secrets. You can always get to them. That's kind of the nature of the beast. The input's untrusted, the output's untrusted. If you train it on something, bad things happen potentially if you're putting things in you shouldn't. So immediately, people are putting their company's code into it. They're putting PII into it to try to get it to do some basic data because they don't understand. I mean, there was a big news article within the past couple of weeks where the lawyers used ChatGPT to find fake law, like not on purpose, but they found fake lawsuits to cite in an issue, and that turned out to be a problem. And that's another big problem, is especially for junior software developers, junior security engineers, or associate security professionals. You don't know what it's doing wrong. It does a really good job of looking like it's correct. And if you don't have the seniority or the experience to know it's wrong, you're going to have a lot of really bad code, and it hallucinates. It gets some things wrong. There, I'm sure it's already happened or will happen. Somebody's going to use ChatGPT to write something that's going to be a core part of major software, and it's gonna have and it's gonna mistype a dependency. It's not gonna be requests. It's gonna be like requests with two S's, and that's gonna be just siphoning off all of your data. Um, but for senior engineers that know what it's doing and knows when it's doing something wrong, and I think I discussed this a little bit with Matt in person a couple of times, that like if you know how to do it, it's really, really useful. It saves you a ton of time, but you have to have the experience to know it's there. And I mean, that potentially creates a whole nother problem where students are using it in school or when they're supposed to be learning, but they're learning with ChatGPT and not actually how to write code. So they become fully dependent on it. And then you have another industry problem where finding skills is even harder without it. It's pretty cool though.
Yeah, hell yeah, it's super cool. It'll be interesting to see how sort of the AI plays out. Like on the security side, that's one thing as well, but just building things in general seems like holistically it doesn't understand how to build larger applications, at least piece by piece, and tends to screw that up. But do you have sort of any advice for companies or people trying to get into DevOps or DevSecOps on sort of how to not only how to make the transition, but things that they should understand and fully know to sort of be in one of those roles?
Yeah, so it's a very difficult role for juniors to be in because even DevOps, you have to know so many things, and then DevSecOps, you need to know so many things, and you need to know security. So it's a pretty difficult role to get into, especially for smaller companies like mine, where I'm potentially the only person at several of my roles. So you have to kind of know everything and do everything. But for new people or for companies looking to get into DevOps or DevSecOps, it's as much a technology shift as it is a cultural one. You have to be willing to be humble. You have to be willing to be empathetic and collaborate, potentially in areas you've never collaborated with people you may have battled with in the past, especially, with older types of organizations where security and devs are potentially constantly at odds. You know, for people who really want to get into it, really don't just try to understand the tech. Try to understand the business. Understand what motivates people in the business. How does the business actually function? Where's money made? When you're trying to push out these things, it's going to cause problems, and you need to understand where, the business can take a hit potentially time-wise in software development, because anything you add is going to cause friction, and especially while you work out the kinks. So, be humble, be really empathetic. Change. Everybody hates change. I hate change as much as the next guy. I hate change as much as the people I'm pushing change on. The devs, when their flow gets interrupted, even if whether it's security or something else, they're not going to necessarily enjoy it. So really be open, be honest, be willing to take hard advice. Sometimes negative feedback is good. You need that feedback to improve, and just be willing to improve. And if you show the teams and the org that what you're doing is good and show them the light, they'll get it. It might take some time. It will take some time. And when I say time, I don't mean it's going to take a couple of weeks or a couple of months. For many orgs, it will take years. 1 to 2 years of that type of transformation is pretty normal. And that's potentially only to be at phase 1 or phase 2 of your transition. But you will develop better software, and it will be more secure. And if you're a newbie, I know it's hard. There's so much to learn, one step at a time. Too many people are trying to learn 50 different things, get all the certs. And honestly, mostly ignore the certs. Most of them are nonsense. They're the multiple choice tests teaching you nothing. They teach you how to memorize some stuff that, during the job I can Google. Focus one thing at a time. One Lego block at a time will build your Millennium Falcon. There's a lot of Legos in that thing.
Yeah, one analogy I like to use for that, as far as the development cycle and doing it securely, is it's kind of more like sustainable growth. It's kind of like,
It's scaled significantly better.
Yeah, like if you create and start shipping products with a bunch of vulnerabilities from the business aspect, you might increase revenues very quickly, but a lot of that's probably going to get clawed back when either you have some sort of breach in your product, or at least some sort of other issue with one of your customers, and they're going to come back looking at you as, why did you give us this vulnerable product?
Yeah, especially with startups, you're dealing with, you have a burn rate. You're dealing with how much money you have, and you need to start generating revenue and customers. And to do that, you need to push a product. So you put off one thing here or there, and all that tech debt ends up, you end up having to deal with it at some point. Whether it's a breach or you have to rewrite significant portions of your product to fix things. The earlier you adopt, the DevSecOps principles, even if you don't necessarily have a full-time security engineer to start, but if you start implementing things like tools like Sneak, where you can do a lot with a little very quickly, then you'll churn out better software with less tech debt over time.
Hey, one question. So, for people looking to get into security, whether they're just starting their career, maybe right out of college, or they're transitioning from maybe somewhere else in tech or a different role outside of tech, what advice do you give people trying to get into security? What's worked for you?
The first thing I always tell everybody is to figure out what you want to do in security, because there's so much to do. It's very wide field. It's very broad field. I suggest everybody has at least some technical job first. For a lot of people, that will be help desk. And that help desk is an awesome job. You learn a lot. For some people, it might be as a software developer. That way you have the background to have some authority on telling people to fix things. A lot of companies, they hire people straight out of college that never worked on anything. And then they're like, all I see are critical vulnerabilities. They don't know what it means. They can't understand the context. They don't have any background to understand the context. So, try to start somewhere technical outside of security. And I know for a lot of people, they don't want to hear that. It's not, they just want to start as a security, those big paying security jobs, hack the planet type stuff. But, you need to build a foundation that's solid. If you try to build a house on the beach in the sand next to the ocean, you're going to have a bad time. You will do more, and your career in the long run will be significantly better if you have a good base. Get that base knowledge, do everything that needs to be done to have the knowledge to actually be an authority of security at your org. Figure out where you want to go. Everybody says they want to be a security analyst, but security analyst means 50 different things. You can be a SOC analyst as a security analyst. You could be a vulnerability management specialist. You could be an engineer as an analyst. You could just be you could just be making Splunk queries all day. Actually try to meet people in real life. Go to meetups. Go to meetup.com or try to find whatever your local security meetup is, and just meet people. Try to find out what it is they do, understand, what they're doing and what you want to do. That way, it's significantly easier to build a path knowing your destination. But if you just say, I want to be security, then your destination could be 50 different places. You're going to be walking through the woods forever.
Yeah, I think that is really important. You touched on just kind of mastering and understanding technology holistically, because you're really only going to be as good at securing it as you are at understanding the products and technologies that you're securing.
Yeah, I think a large portion of why I've been so successful in my career is because I've been a technologist first, rather than necessarily being a security professional first.
Hey, well, Trevor, this has been awesome. If people want to follow you for more insights, where's the best spot to follow you, or maybe you don't want to be found?
You can come reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm pretty sure it's like Trevor Costanzi or Trevor.Costanzi or something like that. I'm sure you can put up my name somewhere and just reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm happy to talk about DevSecOps with anybody, even newbies or any orgs that have any questions. I love talking about cloud, application security, how to automate it, CI/CD pipelines. Matt knows I'll go on for hours. I give a lot of talks at our local meetups. So if you're in the Phoenix area, feel free to come join us at either 2600 or any of the other ones. I'll probably give a talk at one of them.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for coming on. This was awesome.
Yeah, it's
Thank you.
great to be here. Appreciate you guys having me.
Hey guys, so we're helping some of our clients fill open IT and cybersecurity roles. So if you're interested in exploring new opportunities, contact us via the link in the description.